So we're from Michigan, so I just want to make sure I'm saying good afternoon and it's appropriate, right? So it's good afternoon now, right? So my wife and I want to introduce my wife, 24 years, Barbara. And as empty nesters now, as of August the 9th, we can travel together now. So we love it. We love it. And we always enjoy coming to San Diego too. So it's not, you twist your arm, right, to come here. Pretty amazing place. So thank you. I want to also say thank you to the Aller International School of Business and Young, as well as meeting Sheila as well and talking about the Career Center as well. And my buddy Robert Foster, who we met back a few years ago at this SVN, so Social Venture Network in Baltimore, Maryland. And we just talked, and I'm like, then he called me like a few months ago. I'm like, you remember that talk from way back then? We were just hanging out, so, but it was great. We had just a great conversation. So I want to speak with you. I've got, 45 minutes. And where's my phone, honey? I want to make sure I time myself. So 45 minutes means 45 minutes. And then you can ask questions afterwards if you want. But I want to talk with you about diversity and inclusion, but I'm going to come at it, I think, from perhaps a different angle. So I started my firm 2005, and our take on it is a bit different because it really focuses, there's two parts of diversity and inclusion. So first of all, diversity essentially it's an adjective as I look at it and as we talk about it. It simply describes the room. Inclusion talks about, it's the act of including, the diversity that's in the room. Cultural competency is a skill set that really people can use to manage a very, very diverse team, and how do you leverage the assets and maximize that team. And then, of course, equity speaks to access at the end of the day. So I try to give it and explain it in a way where you can write it down and kind of take it from here. Because the more people that we have talking about diversity, inclusion, equity, cultural competency, the better. And my particular bent is actually focused on the business imperative. So there are two parts, that I work in quite a bit, but my main focus would be with companies. So there's the social imperative. The social imperative is essentially, it's the right thing to do. And I don't think we would get too many people that say, no, Scott, it's the wrong thing to do. I've heard it said, recently that it might be the wrong thing to do. But the point is that most folks will never argue that it's the right thing to do. So the social imperative. And I think we have a base built around that conversation. I'm going to talk about the other side, which is the business imperative. Why is it important for businesses to understand the importance of diversity? Why is it important that shareholder value is actually something that diversity is a large contributor to when it's done right? So this is where we're going to talk about it. So I first want to talk to you about the beautiful room. And the beautiful room is where most organizations get stuck. So the reason I said that it's starting where most stop is because most of the time, and we work with clients all around the world, I can't tell you the number of diversity champions and teams I've led around the world. And so I'm going to talk to you about what I've seen, what I've experienced. So you can take the theory, if you have theory around it, and hopefully I can land it on the ground for you after spending time with just a myriad of people from different walks of life. So the reason I talk about starting where most stop is because most organizations, they stop with just the beautiful makeup of the room. But that's actually where you should start. Because now that you have the beautiful room, your next step actually is to leverage the brains in the room, right? Perspective, and when you think about it, we're even taught through nature. The heterogeneity of nature teaches us, right? You talk about biodiversity. We want diversity in our investment portfolios, right? So diversity is a good thing, and we're very comfortable with it, but sometimes we get goofy when we talk about it as it relates to people. And I'm saying, don't get goofy. Let's just move forward and talk about it. So when we talk about the beautiful room, that is actually where, once you have that makeup, the next step is to leverage the brains in the room. And how do we do that? So I'll talk a bit about that. I like this quote. Said, it is not necessary to change. Survival is not mandatory. Right? W. Edwards Deming is really considered the father of total quality management. So Six Sigma, total quality, ISO, those types of process quality initiatives, Kaizen events, those types of things. This guy really was very big in that entire movement. So the reason I put that up there is because, again, the clients that I work with and the clients that I have worked with, sometimes they've got, whether they're public or private, they have shareholder reports they have to put together, right? They have board meetings that they have to attend to. But they always have to give a bottom line reason for why is diversity good. Now, what's interesting to me is people, they'll still ask the question, so tell me the business case. And so my response to them now is that there's so much information around the business case till you just have to go and pull it up. It's out there now. When I first started doing that, that was the big question. Well, tell me about the business case. What's the business case? And really, it's quite simple because when you have a customer, and customers come from all walks of life, right? If they find a great reason to come back to your restaurant or to your coffee house or to, even to your university, right? There's your business case. When one opts out and you've got a great employee and he or she decides to leave after 3 months and you know that they move their entire family to a particular place to open up a business or to start something, that's your business case, right? Because people tend to, and in the United States, we tend to talk about diversity as it relates to generally gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, that type of thing. But it's so much bigger than that. Diversity in its purest form is just difference. So when I go to China, I work with sales teams and sales leaders. They, like human beings tend to do, find any way to separate, right? Just as human beings do. When I go to Southern Africa and work in Namibia, South Africa, we work with it through a different lens. When I go to India, or when I go to Singapore, Brazil, or Germany. But the point is the real payout of diversity is innovation. So however you need to rearrange your team, and I'm a big proponent of organizations working horizontally now, not as much I call it death by silo. So when people in organizations work vertically, what happens is they tend to isolate, and they tend to think just like that particular silo, that vertical silo thinks. The problem with that is that groupthink is real, and groupthink is dangerous. And in an economy where the one who has the best idea wins, well, the least thing we want to do is think alike. We want to think different. Now, we have to make a decision then between comfort versus creativity. You can't have both. And what I want for organizations and the clients that we serve, what I love for them to do is to become comfortable in being uncomfortable. That's what I want. Once you're able to do that, you are in a room where you don't want folks that are just like you in the room. You want people that are different from you because there's a tremendous value in thinking different, but it's not comfortable until you finally say, I love this. This is okay. To me, it's like breathing pure oxygen, right? So, I mean, it's a wonderful place to be where people don't look like me, don't think like me. But a lot of times we are so forced to we want comfort over that. So we sacrifice creativity for the sake of comfort. And again, in an economy of ideas, that actually does not really get us to where we need to go. So I like this guy. I love his hair too, by the way. But I love what he says. He says, we can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we use to create them. We can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we use to create them. In other words, you cannot solve level 2 problems with level 2 solutions, level 2 thinking. We need level 3 thinking to solve level 2 problems. And you know as well as I do that we live in a world now where some of the things we have, some of the questions, we don't even know the questions right now. There's so many things that are out there. One of the things that we are certain about is that we live in time of uncertainty, right? And so when you begin to talk about multinational teams and people working with 10 countries, on the WebEx or on the telephone conferences or at their strategic planning sessions, the benefit of having heterogeneity around the table is that you can actually more quickly access level 3 thinking. And that's what you want. right? And I think, coming to California and being in rooms like this and, being in San Diego specifically, I mean, I know every room doesn't look like this in California. I'm not like crazy, right? So, but the point is, USD and then communities like this, this is just what happens, right? So the value of this particular culture, in fact, I was teaching educators a couple nights ago. We had our kids in a public school system where there are 90 languages in 70 countries. We pulled them out of private school. Our daughter never went to the private school, but we pulled our son out of private school because we believed that it was more important that he get that cultural competency education than he got this private faith-based education, right? And so we took him out because, where else can you get 90 languages? Think what the value of 90 languages? Are you kidding me? You can only get that in expatriate schools where they have kids from all around the world, but all their dads or moms are senior VPs and heads of this and that. So there's no socioeconomic diversity there, though. And what we loved about that particular district is that it has all those things. Again, teaching and learning that is actually the norm. That is not the exception. So when people talk about the mainstream, we have to recast the narrative of what mainstream looks like. Mainstream is more closely aligned with this room than it is homogeneous rooms. Does that make sense so far? You with me? Don't just nod, say something. Thank you. Okay, here we go. All right. I love this. This teaches all by itself. Right? Right? Successful organizations of the fast, right? You're just the type we're looking for. Now, are they going for comfort or creativity? They're going for comfort, right? You look like me, we're from the same side of the tracks, you know the same people, all those different things. That's great if you're making quilts. It's not great if you're trying to lead a team and if you're trying to create something new, right? And so this is where we were. And it made sense, but it doesn't make sense anymore. It doesn't work anymore. It doesn't serve us anymore, right? And show me a heterogeneous, monolithic organization or team, and I will put heterogeneous, diverse team next to it, and I will beat just everything out of that homogeneous team every time. University of Michigan, Towers Perry, University of Texas at Austin, Wharton School of Business, did 3 independent studies, and they all came up with essentially the same thing, and that was that heterogeneous teams are more innovative as it relates to ideas and ideation and the production of ideas. And so homogeneous teams, they norm faster, but they run out of fuel in a shorter amount of time. Okay? So it won't work in there. This is what we're looking at. My wife can tell you one of my favorite words is mosaic. Right? I got a Mosaic Film Festival happening next Wednesday and Thursday, 1,300 high school kids. It's called the Mosaic Film Experience. I served on the board of the Symphony in Grand Rapids. It's called the Mosaic Scholarship now, right? So my handprint of Mosaic is all over the place. I got another curriculum I'm writing with a publisher right now. It's going to be called the Mosaic Project, right? Because I love that picture. That is an amazing picture. And the thing about it is what it takes people to be exactly themselves. The point is not that they look alike. The point is that they have a human experience. Having spent time in South Africa, I really fell in love with a term called Ubuntu. And Ubuntu simply says, I am because you are, right? You are enough just by being human. And to the degree that I marginalize any part of you is to the degree that I actually marginalize myself. And that's what I love about Ubuntu. Because it's actually on the person, the person that actually is doing that marginalization or kind of throwing off something that is not good. It actually says more about the person that's doing that than it is a person that's the recipient of that. So Ubuntu is a beautiful phrase. And again, this is the room that organizations need to get used to. So in a snapshot, we're talking about diversity, as I said before, diversity, inclusion, cultural competency, equity, right? That is the adjective, that is the action, that is the asset, that is the access. In a nutshell, that's where we live. What I spend a lot of time doing is working with organizational leaders, helping them understand that it's just not enough to have a beautiful room. But once you get the room, now let's look at a product, let's look at a service, let's look at a way of reorganizing our teams in a way where the output is actually higher, because now we're taking sales and operations and we're taking engineering, we're putting them all in the same room. And previously, they were all having separate planning meetings. I'm like, why would you? Don't do that. The best type of meetings are when you've got all the disciplines coming in the room and where you've got people that don't know the wrong questions, that whether a question is wrong or right. Right? If I go into a room, and I work with engineers and stuff and attorneys and all different types of folks, but it's great. I don't need to know their language. And in fact, if I don't know their language, that's actually better, because I come with a different perspective. I don't know the questions that I shouldn't ask. Isn't that okay? So when you talk about, and I know that students in the room as well, one of your best assets is being in rooms like this. One of your best assets is being open to being in rooms where people aren't like you and they don't think like you. If the goal is innovation, and heterogeneity drives innovation, if properly managed, what you don't want is an homogeneous room. You don't want homogeneous teams, right? And so that's where this becomes really interesting for business. I know there's some typos on there, but I had to take the slide because it made a good point. So anyway, for English people, the English professors in the room, I don't want to torture you or anything. So anyways, but the question is this: where were you when the world changed? But talk about a new way of thinking. Look at this. The most valuable photo company sells no cameras. Uber owns no cars. Largest accommodation owns no hotels. Alibaba is a large retailer, no inventory. Netflix, growing television network, lays no cables. And the most popular media provider creates no content. Toto, we are not in Kansas anymore. Right? You agree with that? We are completely in a place we've never been before. So to have a traditional way of structuring teams and structuring companies, you've got to be kidding me. It won't work. And I've seen hundreds of these now. I can tell you, it won't work now. This is not theory for me. I see this every day. We are in a place we've never been before. There is a large grocery retailer in Grand Rapids, private company, probably about I think last time I checked, it was about $15 billion was kind of the size of the organization. Do you think that they would have ever had a day where they woke up in the morning and an online bookseller had just become their worst nightmare? You know what I'm talking about? Amazon buying Whole Foods, right? And the organization in my city is a massive organization. If they were thinking like people simply in the grocery business, they got caught on their heels. My point is this: the benefit, organizations that really, really want to lead have to not just talk about the future, you got to create the future. And you have a better opportunity to create the future when you have your blind spots are minimal, because you have people in the room that don't think like you do. So this is an economy that we live in now. It's only going to accelerate, right? So this is an opportunity, and that's when this really gets fun. If this doesn't, it shouldn't scare you. It should say, "Wow, this is great." Particularly the students in the room. This is kind of cool. I can create stuff, right? So it's a great opportunity. We live in an amazing time of opportunities. So shift happens, right? And it's there, and it's all around us, and we have to get used to that. So when you kind of put us up on a sheet here, like on a big grid, you kind of see how very different we are, but also that 7.5 billion people on the planet, this is at least what we have in common with each other. I mean, look at that. Now, what I do with my clients and what we do as a firm is we begin to get this understanding inside of their HR policies and processes. Why? We believe, no matter your title, you should have one part of your compensation tied to cultural competency. I don't care if you're an engineer. I don't care if you're the head of learning and development. I don't care if you're the head of the company. You need to have cultural competency connected to your personal economics. Why is that? Because that's when people pay attention. When your check rises or falls based upon your understanding that people aren't just like us, right? When you get compensated based upon that understanding, you all of a sudden pay attention. It's magical, right? It's the way that it happens. It's so much fun, right? And so, but the point is when I talk about the leadership of now and the future is the leader that understands that everybody that reports to her is not like her, and the goal is not to be like her. That on her best day in leading and being a leader is when these folks are being perfectly themselves. Her job is to leverage the fact that they're different. So you see how heterogeneity gets us to a point of innovation? Because ideas clash, and that's not a bad thing if you understand how to manage it. This is a good book. Everybody, talks about Good to Great and Built to Last, and that's great. This book is actually kind of came out, it was kind of a sleeper book because Jim's whole idea was the fact, he says, you know what? I found that there's some companies that I thought would be great, good to great, or built to last, but they didn't last after 2008. So this book actually came after those, and the point is that organizations found there are certain things that he thought would cause them to last longer than they did. But after 2008, some of those organizations weren't around. And here's some of the reasons. Notice, by the way, that the first stage towards decline that he cites is hubris. What's another word for hubris? Huh? Arrogance. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. One of the worst enemies of a successful company is their success in this day and age. Why? Because they've so validated and they have so found that their current algorithm, it produces for them till they got lazy. They went to sleep, and then Blockbuster happens. How is it that Sears and Roebuck, right, that created the catalog business got kicked out of the industry that they created only to buy back in through LL Bean? How is that? Fell asleep at the wheel. That's how it happens. Success can be your worst enemy. So all my clients that are number one in their categories, whether they be healthcare systems or schools or school districts, whatever that might be, one of the first things I do is deliver the news that, you know what, you're successful and that's your worst problem. What does that do? It keeps the organization always looking for what's next if they stay hungry. And you see the various stages. I'm not going to go through all those, but the point behind this is that arrogance is the first step into irrelevance. So that's why we always need to think about the next thing. I love the book I read about Steve Jobs. It says when he met with a Xerox scientist, the guy said, you know what? He said the best way to predict the future is to create it. I'm like, high five. I like that. And that's really true. And that's what smart organizations are doing. The organization that controls the language controls the culture. When you can control the way that people communicate, you actually are able to kind of cite what's next. So the whole idea, when we have organizations that are have hubris because of success, or the people that I work with on a regular basis, the real question that I have for them is, because now there's so much information around diversity and inclusion, so D&I, I'll call it for short. There's so much information around D&I now. It's so available. And so when organizations don't want, one of the things I'll hear them say is, well, we don't really know how to do it. I'm like, okay, so I understand when you made the phone call, right? I get that. But what I also find is once they know what to do, will they do it? So that's why this talks about being uninformed. I can work with that. Unwilling, I can't work with that. But here's the thing, unwillingness will bite you in the butt these days. because the marketplace is very quick to react when organizations don't want to get it. Not that they don't get it. I can work with that. I mean, because there's stuff I don't get. We all have blind spots. But there's a difference between not getting it and not wanting to get it versus not getting it and really being open to getting it. When I worked in the magazine, it was all about the list, the top 50 companies for diversity. And I spent my time talking with these leaders around, okay, you've got this great score this time. What are you planning to do better the next time we have the list? And so that's where I really began to listen. Like, what are you going to do to really take this great status and take it to the next level? So this is one of the things that organizations have to really become honest about. Uninformed, unwilling, or is it a little bit of both? And it can be a little bit of both. That's okay. But you have to be willing. My hope is, and the organizations we work with are those that they just don't know what they don't know, but they're willing to know. That's very different. There's no magic bullet. I was talking with Young and with Sheila, and I was like, I used to tell folks in the early days, they'd say, well, how about, Scott, how long do you think this is going to take? And I would say, uninformed, about, 10 to 12 months. They're like, really? Let's sign up. Now that I have a few war wounds and I've seen a few things, the process actually is about 24 to 36 months. Because what you're talking about in the industry that I work in terms of problem solving, is what I call climate control, right? Organizations, so leadership is to climate what thermostat is to temperature. I'll say it again. Leadership is to climate what thermostat is to temperature. Climate determines what grows. Leadership sets the climate and determines what grows in any organization, right? And so we'd love to grow oranges in Michigan. It ain't gonna happen. Why? No climate. Apples, I think we can probably, we got some serious contenders there. But leadership sets climate, and climate determines what grows. And so the point is you have to have leadership that is willing to say, okay, we're going to create this environment where XYZ can grow, right? So one of our clients right now is about 130 attorneys. My focus next Tuesday when I work with them again is around making a pathway for partnership and equity partnership for the women attorneys in the firm. So they realize they have a problem. The leadership contacts our firm, talks to me, and they know that it's time for climate change in their organization. And that's what we do. So that the women attorneys can actually stay there and grow. And by the way, one of the biggest things that I see in the law profession in general is that women are penalized for having kids. As opposed to, right, the point is, have options, right? If they want to work out of the office for 2 or 3 months, that's one of those particular types of professions. You can actually kind of be on your laptop and do some amazing stuff there because it's IP, it's intellectual property, it's that kind of work. So that's where I'm trying to help shift climate in that particular law firm, because here's the thing, and if we are successful in that, which we will be, that actually makes it better for the firm in general, not just for the women in the firm. Everybody wins. And see, when diversity and innovation is tied in right, everybody benefits. Supply chain, HR, organizational parts of it, your process improvement people, it helps everybody. And so I don't really look at it as some touchy-feely, warm and fuzzy thing. I'm like, you know what? This is just better business. And it doesn't matter which company you put this practice in what country, it will perform if you follow the principles of it. So 2L, 3BQ. So 2 laws, 3 big questions. So the first law is this. Diversity plus inclusion equals innovation, right? Diversity by itself is not enough. Again, that is the stopping point where many organizations should be starting. So we need other things than simply diversity. We need inclusion, cultural competency, equity, all those different things. That is kind of your toolbox that really gives you a disproportionate chance at success. People are not an organization's greatest asset. Engaged people are an organization's greatest asset. Disengaged people are an organization's greatest liability. Now, this is what happens when you talk to yourself sometime, okay? So I've heard myself, I would say this, well, people are an organization's greatest asset. And I heard myself say it one day, I'm like, I disagree with you. So I said, really think about what you said. I'm like, you know what? No, engaged people are an organization's greatest asset. So there's something in HR, in organizations, it's called turnover. Who's heard of that term before? Right? Turnover, right, is where it's time the person retires or gets fired or something. They get the little box and the little personal effects, maybe the mounted bass on the wall, right, some degrees and things, and they give the box and they walk them out to the parking lot. I've seen that. But much more insidious that is affecting businesses around the world, particularly businesses in the United States, is something I call turn under. And turn under are where people quit and stay. The power of that is because you're still paying them, they're on payroll, and they're present in bodily form, but they've not been to work in a couple years. See, once you're done with turnover, they go, you see them literally, they're not on the payroll anymore. They got a severance package or insurance, that goes for X amount of months. That's great, fine. There's a finite amount to when you're going to continue to pay that out. Turn under, if you're not paying attention, they show up, their avatar shows up, their persona shows up. And if you're not engaged as a leader, you're like, hey, guess what? Man, they've been here for 35 years. They haven't been to work for the last 7. But you didn't check because you don't check in with your people. Right? You think Harvey was just built, what he does in your company, he just makes machines. And Harvey, because you let him just kind of sit there and make his machines, you're actually tapping into only 5% of his innovative capacity because you've relegated him to his job title. Harvey's a machinist. No, he works for you as a machinist. Harvey is like a genius in a lot of other ways. But you know him as a machinist, so he's relegated to that little corner of the table. And so the organization misses out because they don't get all of Harvey. See that? I mean, it's just one of those things where sometimes I think that people, some of the leaders I've met, they are their own worst enemy. They create their own box. They paint their own self into corners. I'm like, if you just fix this, you could actually, this would work over it. But wait a minute, Scott, we've been doing this for 65 years. I'm like, it's time to change. Some of the things I tell people that I'm going to do, and at lunch I said, it's funny because I'm very direct with my clients, and it's so funny because they keep asking me to come back. And I think they like the fact that I'm going to tell them truth. Because our focus is not to have a bunch of clients. We work very deeply with a select few. But we work there 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years. And so the whole idea is we want leaders to not create their own minefields, right? Some of the worst things that they can do are create an opportunity where they can't access all of the people's gifts and abilities and insight and understanding. So, first big question, what's your motive? Right? In other words, why are you doing this? And I love it when people are they're looking at working with us and they tell us the truth. You know what, Scott? We're getting sued. I'm like, you know what? Thank you for telling me that. That helps, right? I know what I'm dealing with, right? Little EEOC conversation, right? Little Department of Justice, and we've worked with them all. Okay, I get that. Or Scott, we want to win an award. Okay, cool, we can work with that too. But being honest is like so helpful because I know what I'm dealing with. And there's some that say, well, we really want to do it for our employees. And I get in and I actually see what's going on. I'm like, you know what? You are not being truthful. So we fired a couple clients. We're like, you know what? This is incongruent. You got to go. Go work with somebody else. Because I really am there, and our firm and our people that we deploy into these organizations, we're there to really make a change. So I sleep really, really well at night because the softest pillow is a clear conscience, right? And every single time I show up, I know that I'm there with my whole heart, my insight, all the things I've been working on. So I really am trying to help. That's why, I just tell the truth. And, it's like if you really want to work, you want to win the award or you want to help your people. And by the way, I've never met a human resource. I've only met moms and dads and brothers and sisters and sons and daughters. And if we can take that word HR, which is okay, particularly my friends that are in HR, when I tell them it doesn't exist like that, they love talking about that. But when I really help them see, you work with people. And if you stay connected to the people in your organization, then the decisions that you make will be tied to people, not to some nebulous term called asset or resource. What's the big deal, right? The second big question, or the methodology, is really big. The reason that Global Bridgebuilders does, we don't do advertising, but we continue to have work is because we have a different take. Our take is really process focused. So when we talk about, is this a process focused initiative or is it a program focused initiative? And don't get them twisted. So a program is finite. And generally it's about diverse beans and it's t-shirts and it's multicultural lunches. And I love all that and the food is great. But have you tied a metric to it? Because I want to measure it. Because the road of diversity and inclusion is strewn with the dead bodies of diversity champions that got hyped up on a program. Programs don't last. Programs aren't systemic. Programs aren't embedded into the way that an organization thinks. I'm interested in getting the initiative so embedded into the organization that you can't pull it apart. And I think about it the same way I think of your department for people or human resources or your operations or your financial systems. It's the same thing because it really is your people strategy is what it is when it's done right. So process focus, those are infinite. They just keep going. You keep measuring them. You never actually arrive. You keep measuring them and you just continue to really be focused on getting it right. Okay, so this is our model that we work with. Organizations that we created, and I put it as a circle. I have it as stair steps as well, but this is something, as we go with organizations, there's a 5-step process that we work with organizations to get them to that point, right? Again, this is not your program, this is your process. So notice that there's a tool we created called the ISA. It's actually the first diversity and inclusion tool of its kind that actually is based on the Baldrige. It's a process tool I know you take pictures. It is beautiful, isn't it? Yes, it is. You should see how it works. Actually, it's even more beautiful. We conduct the assessment, we establish the teams, right? And then we talk about the process or the improvement. So the assessment comes out, it's like 74 different questions. You respond to that. Oh, 5 minutes, okay, cool. You respond to those. And then from there, you actually, you begin to go around this entire process. So the inclusion, the improvement, organizational performance, that's where we talk about working horizontally versus vertically. Celebrate the success, but notice after we evaluate the progress and improve, we start all over again. So what we do is we actually take the tool, we deploy it into the organization in any of the locations in any language, and then in 2 years from that point, we actually deploy it again. From there, we create a gap analysis and we measure the progress that's been made between the organization from 2017 to 2019. So that's how it goes. So measure, manage, improve. Measure, manage, improve. Measure, manage, and improve. That's how you get movement. But think about it. Isn't this how you do every other function in a business? So why would diversity get a free pass? It shouldn't. It's a process. It's a discipline. So this is how we work with this. So where should it be seen, right? Evaluating our inclusive processes within your organization. This is kind of your first take. This is our focus, right? When we talk about the ISA, the Inclusion Systems Assessment, we measure these 5 areas because that actually gives you a sustainable framework. And we are really about helping organizations sustain what they do. What happens when a diversity champion comes in and builds a program is when they leave, the program implodes. And what I'm interested in is creating it so that it's a process that is ubiquitous in nature around the entire organization. So it might be housed in one particular area, but it actually is felt across the entire organization. Some of our healthcare clients, that have been 25,000 employees. The point is, it's not the chief diversity officer. It's to be in everything, from the clinicians to the practitioners to the environmental services group. It needs to be a part of everything. So I spent a lot of time in Texas, Dallas to be specific, right? So, but you've seen the commercial around Arby's, right? Where they got the brisket that is 3 minutes right? The 3-minute brisket. There's a big difference between the Arby's brisket and the brisket I taste in Dallas, Texas. The difference is one takes 3 minutes, the other one takes 14 hours, right? When you begin to talk about where you want to see an initiative go as it relates to D&I, you want the marinated that takes 14 hours. And a really good initiative, a really good process, it takes time. It just takes time. 3S, and when I'm almost done, this is something, once we actually find the organization, you take the report that the ISA gives you, now it's time to put it into a chronological or sequencing order. So we created something that we call the 3S. Suddenly, strategic, systemic. Suddenly are things you can do 0 to 30 days. Strategic are things you can do 31 to 120 days. Systemic are those things you can do 121 plus days, right? Short, medium, and long-term goals. But you got to measure it. You got to put a timetable on it, and you have to have a person or a team that's accountable to finish this. So, and as we get to the closing here, some of the things I've seen over time, world-class diversity initiatives, they're successful over a period of time. Produce quantitative or qualitative results, I would say, and qualitative results. Developed recognized or recognizable positive outcomes, including customer satisfaction or some type of definitive positive impact. It's innovative, and it's replicable, portable, or transferable to other parts of the organization with modification. That's when you see something that's world-class. That's where you see something that's world-class. And then it's also meaningful to others, users of that benchmarking data, when you begin to tie in really hard metrics to the initiative. But the point of this initiative is not compliance like affirmative action. The point of this is innovation, so you're leveraging differences for a competitive advantage. Make sense? All right, last one. Ask yourself, how committed is your organization? As I said, the fair weather D&I initiative must die, right? You're in it to win it. You're in it as a process. And then we've got, I love this picture of the bumblebee, but there's a lesson that he teaches us, this notion of cross-pollination. So it's okay that sales works with finance, and finance works with operations, and English works with philosophy, and philosophy works with innovation in the business school. That's all really, really good. And out of that, we can have some amazing, amazing products and services to our students, and then just as a university as well. Comfort zone, but where the magic happens. And yeah. The whole idea is that we have to ask the right question. It's not who's at the table, but it's who's not at the table. So as you have your team meetings, ask that question. Who's not at the table, right? Who should be here? And that will actually give you access to the heterogeneous group that you're looking for to provide the output that you need. And then finally, this whole idea is that innovation and diversity are very distinctly tied together. This is a great book from a friend of mine from University of Michigan, Scott Page, The Difference. And he talks about it as a mathematical equation. So it's another resource for you. Brains, gray equals green, right? It's just a real basic concept, but gray equals green. So to the degree we have biases, and everybody has baggage, right? So I've been at this for many years, and I still call myself a senior beginner, right? But the point is being honest. Once you identify the bias, work to come out of that bias. And as you do, you're actually freed up to think more creatively. Where you want to see it, leadership, like when you talk about inclusion, so where can we see it? Like physically see the initiative as it begins to take root, right? Not that it tells us all of the substance or the quality of the initiative, but here's some basic places to begin. Leadership, workforce, board of directors, supply chain, your marketing, advertising, corporate sponsorships, and then the final one, which is generally sometimes the hardest, is who are you having around your dinner table? Who you break bread with tells a lot about where you're coming from, right? So think about your dinner right now. Think about your dinner table. How often do you have people around the table that are different from you? Show me a person that lives an inclusive life after 5 o'clock, and I'll show you one that's a champion between 9 and 5. It works every time. And I'm done. Thanks so much.